So today we will begin with Sungas, which replaced the Mauryas. If you look at the order of the Shunga dynasty, the Kanva dynasty, Kanava, Kannas, Kanva, all of these mean the same. The term that I use is Kanva. This is the term that I commonly use, but you can also use Kanava, Kanas, or Kanva. Okay, the Shungas replaced the Mauryas, and after that, it was replaced by the Kanva dynasty, and the Kanva dynasty was replaced by the Shatavahana Empire. Okay, the Indo-Greeks were stationed at around the same time as the Shunga dynasty, the Kanva dynasty. Okay, they were stationed somewhere around here, and then we also have the Shakas, which existed at the same time as the Shatavahanas, and we have the Kushana Empire, which replaced pretty much everyone here. The Shunga dynasty, Kanva dynasty at that point was no longer in existence as a powerful kingdom. And then all these were replaced by Kushana Empire. And after the Kushana Empire, we will take a look at the various other kingdoms that came to power, regional kingdoms. So first, we shall take a look at the maps. Okay, if you look at the Shunga Empire, the main stronghold was still Patliputra at the time. Patliputra was the capital of the Magadha Empire. Patliputra was the capital of the Mauryan Empire, and Patliputra continued to be the capital of both the Shunga and the Kanva dynasty. Okay, Patliputra is a very important city in ancient India. So we can see the map of Shunga, the extent to which the Shunga. Now, the Mauryan Empire was covered almost the entirety of India. We have seen that in our previous lectures. The Mauryan Empire was so vast and it was so large. But the kingdoms that came after the Mauryan Empire, if you take a look at it, they did not conquer the entire Mauryan Empire. Some parts were conquered by the Indo-Greeks. We can see it here. And then some parts were conquered by the Shungas, and then the Kanva dynasty, they became smaller than the Shungas. And after the last time, Kanva dynasty was replaced by the Shatavahana Empire, right, which was very large but not as large as the Mauryan Empire. We see the Indo-Greeks, and we also see the Shakas, which ruled this part, the Western Kshatrapas. Okay, the Western Kshatrapas, and the Northwest Kshatrapas ruled this part of the Indian subcontinent. And we also see the Kushana Empire, which is very large but still not as large as the Mauryans. And we also have the Kalinga, which is very little, very small. And we also have the kingdoms of South India, the Chera, Chola, and Pandya. So if you take a look at it, none of these kingdoms were as large or as significant as the Mauryan Empire. The Mauryan Empire covered almost the entirety of India, and it was replaced in bits and pieces by smaller kingdoms. Okay, it's very important for all of you to understand that Chola, Chera, and Pandya, south, and then Shatavahana, if you take a look at it, it's the middle of India, central India, and then Shunga Empire, east, Kanva east, Indo-Greeks northwest, up north, and then west northwest, and we have the Shakas west central, and we also have the Kushana central and north. We have the Kalinga Empire, which is towards the east, and we also have other regional kingdoms, Chola, Chera, and Pandya, in the extreme south. So I hope the map is clear, the geographical extent of every empire. Now, a very important chronology, if you take a look at it, if you look at the timeline of the Mauryan Empire, it ended exactly at 185 BC, after which came the Shungas. They directly replaced the Mauryan Empire, and after which the Shungas were replaced by the Kanvas, right? The Shungas were replaced by the Kanvas, and the Shungas and the Kanvas were not replaced by the Indo-Greeks, okay? The Indo-Greeks continued to rule parts of the Indian subcontinent in the northwest alongside Shungas and the Kanvas. They had some battles. There was this exchange between the Shungas and the Kanvas and the Indo-Greeks, and the Indo-Greeks also sent their ambassador to the court of the Shunga king and so forth. Okay, they had diplomatic exchanges, they had war exchanges and so forth. And when you look at the Shatavahana dynasty, they replaced the Kanvas. They replaced the Kanvas, but why is their kingdom extended all the way up till this part? Because we don't have too much history. The first official Shatavahana ruler who defeated the Kanvas wasn't the first king, okay? But he was the king that founded the empire, that founded the imperial Shatavahana dynasty. But before that, it existed as a very small kingdom around this part. But as a large kingdom, it was only recognized as a large kingdom after they defeated the Kanvas, okay? And we have the Shakas, which existed at around 100 BCE, all the way up till 200 CE. Okay? And we have the Kushanas, which indirectly or directly replaced the Shakas, as well as some parts of Shatavahanas. And their most important ruler is Kanishka, whose rule started in the year 78 AD. So I hope the clarification is clear, the categorization is clear, the visual map is clear. And we also have the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas in the South India. The dates are approximate and follow Proth NCRT chronology. Okay, so let's take a look at the Shunga dynasty first. The dynasty that replaced the Mauryan Empire directly. We look at the founder, Pushyamitra Shunga, Agnimitra, Vasumitra, Bhagabhatra, Devaputi. Now if you take a look at it, the period of rule of Agnimitra, Vasumitra, Bhagabhatra, Devaputi is not given here because the period is not mentioned in NCERT. If it's not mentioned in NCERT, 99% of the time they will not be asking you that question in the examination. And when we talk about ancient India, we only try to memorize the period in the form of either a century or in the form of a date of that particular kingdom, but only a few kings and their dates are needed to be memorized. So here, as long as you memorize the date of Pushyamitra Shunga, you are good to go. What's important is what happened, not the extent of the rule. Okay? As long as you understand the century, when they ruled, as long as you understand the date, the timeline of one king, one of their important kings, that's good enough for your examination. Don't overthink it. If there's no dates given here, leave it aside. Okay? All we know is that it started in the year 185 BC, all the way up till they ruled for around 100 years, and it ended in 73 BC, after which they were replaced by the Kanva dynasty. Is that clear? Don't over-exaggerate your preparation. Now, if you look at Pushyamitra Shunga, these are the 5 important points. He founded the Shunga dynasty by defeating the last Maurya ruler, Brihadrata. The last Maurya ruler was Brihadrata, and he performed the Ashwamedha sacrifice to proclaim his sovereignty. Imagine the horse sacrifice. Do you guys remember the horse was led off to roam free around the country, and whichever territory the horse touches, the king goes and conquers that territory. And that's a rule, right? If the other kingdoms see the horse, and then if they wish to fight against the king that sent the horse, they'll kill the horse. But if they accept the king's sovereignty, if they surrender, they'll just let the horse pass, and the kingdom is considered to have been conquered. That was Ashwamedha sacrifice that we learned about in the previous class, which even Pushyamitra Shunga performed, and based on his performance, he conquered different territories. Okay, he defended the empire against the Indo-Greeks under Demetrius, a very important victory against the Indo-Greeks under Demetrius. He won the war, and he was the patron of Brahmanism. If you look at Shunga dynasty, if you look at the Mauryan dynasty, the dynasty that we studied previously, which religion was the dominant religion? Buddhism, right? Ashoka, he propagated Buddhism. He even sent his son Mahinda to Sri Lanka to propagate Buddhism. We've learned about that. Now here, it revived, the Shunga dynasty revived the Vedic traditions, the Hindu tradition. Okay? Pushyamitra Shunga was a Hindu. By modern definition, he was a Hindu, or he was a patron of Brahmins. Okay, he revived the Vedic traditions, which is very important. He is also the composer of the text Pushamitra Shunga. But you don't need to memorize that, because who is the composer of the text Pushamitra Shunga? The person itself. Very easy to memorize, but important to keep in mind. Next is Agnimitra. Agnimitra is a very important king in the sense that he is the protagonist of the play Malvik Agnimitra by Kalidasa. He was a son of Pushamitra Shunga. Now I will relate Pushamitra Shunga, Agnimitra, and Vasumitra. Okay, in one of the stories mentioned in Malvik Agnimitra by Kalidasa a little later on, he successfully maintained the empire and suppressed revolts. Agnimitra was a very capable king, and after which came Vasumitra. He was a powerful ruler who extended the empire. The most important point is this: he defeated the Indo-Greeks. The Indo-Greeks were also known as Yavanas. Okay, if you take a look at the previous maps, the Shungas resided here, the Indo-Greeks resided here. So they were always in conflict. Okay, they were always in conflict. Now, sometimes they would wage war against each other, and sometimes Indo-Greeks would send the ambassador to the court of the Shunga kings and so forth. They had exchanges in the form of war as well as in the form of diplomacy. Now, if you take a look at it, Vasumitra defeated the Indo-Greeks, Yavanas, and restored Shunga authority in the northwest. So what happened was, Pushamitra Shunga, he performed the Ashwamedha sacrifice. At the time, Pushamitra Shunga was the king, okay? And Agnimitra was under him, his son, and then his grandson. Let's say Agnimitra was kind of like a governor, okay? And Agnimitra's son, Vasumitra, was kind of like a general, army general, that was sent to war for experiences, that was sent to war to, raise his name. So Pushamitra Shunga performed the Ashwamedha sacrifice, and the horse reached the territory of the Indo-Greeks. Okay, the horse reached the territory of the Indo-Greeks. Now, what does this mean? This means that by the laws of divinity, the god has vested in Pushamitra Shunga the duty to go and conquer the Indo-Greeks. So it is up to the Indo-Greeks whether they accept Pushamitra Shunga's sovereignty or to kill the horse. Right? What did the Indo-Greeks do? They killed the horse. They killed the horse, and Pushamitra Shunga realized that Kilomunjaze. Okay? And then he sent his grandson Vasumitra to conquer the Indo-Greeks. And Vasumitra defeated the Indo-Greeks very badly. He defeated the Indo-Greeks. This is one of the victories that the Shunga dynasty celebrated for decades. Okay? So Vasumitra defeated the Indo-Greeks and restored the Shunga authority in the northwest. And only after that, the Indo-Greeks, they sent Heliodorus, which we will learn about in the next slide, as an ambassador to the court of Pushamitra Shunga. Okay? We'll learn about that. Now, the last king was Devabuti. Some kings existed between them, but not important. The last king was Devabuti. The last king of the Shunga dynasty was Devabuti. After him, the power of the Shungas declined and the dynasty ended. Okay? The last king, Devabuti, was defeated by the first Kushana, by the first Gandhva king. We will learn about that later. So, these are the facts. The Shungas ruled about 100 years. Their rule saw a revival of Brahmanical tradition, Hinduism. Okay? And when we talk about important developments of the Shunga dynasty, we will look at the Sanji Stupa. Sanji Stupa, who erected the Sanji Stupa? Who made the Sanji Stupa? It was Ashoka. Okay? It was Ashoka, but Sanji Stupa continued to be repaired, restored by different kings over time. So, even the Shunga dynasty continued to repair and add to the Sanji Stupa. If you take a look at the political geography of the Shunga Empire, this was Shunga Empire at its peak. Okay, the main center, like I said, both for the Shungas and the Kanvas, even after the decline of the Mauryas, Patliputra continued to be the main center. Uh, Patliputra was situated at the confluence of the Ganga River and the Kantak and the Son River. Right? I talked about the importance of Patliputra, and when it comes to economy, when it comes to trade and commerce, they levy taxes to anyone passing by. It was a gateway to this part, and they also went all the way up till Taxila, right, via the Ganga River, and which was the gateway to the Central Asia. Okay, and it happened this way too, through the Bay of Bengal. Now, their capital was Patliputra. Vidisha became an important Shunga center. Shunga control was smaller and less centralized than the Mauryan Empire. Okay, so in foreign relations, important points that you need to know is the major conflict with the Indo-Greeks, the Yavanas, which we mentioned about earlier. Vasumitra and the Ashwamedha horse is an important literary reference. I've explained that. In the play Malvik Agnimitram by Kalitasa, Vasumitra, the son of Pushamitra Shunga, was sent to protect the Ashwamedha horse from the Greeks who attacked it. Now, if you look at Vasumitra, this is the battle. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the Shunga dynasty. Religion, culture, art, and literature. Shunga rulers are associated with a revival of Brahmanical or Vedic traditions. Very important point, religion. Ashwamedha is a clear symbol, but Buddhism continued just because they continue to uphold the Brahmanical religion. It doesn't mean they subjugated the Buddhists, the people who followed Buddhism and Jainism. They continue to encourage restoration and developments of various Buddhist structures such as the Sanji and the Barhut, which were also constructed by Ashoka, right? So Buddhism continued. Buddhist monuments such as Sanji and Barhut received additions or developments. Okay, therefore it is very important to not learn the oversimplified statement, the Shungas destroyed Buddhism. No, they did not destroy Buddhism, they just followed the Brahmanical tradition. Okay, so if you look at the Sanji Stupa and the Barhut Stupa, the stupa was very simple when Ashoka built it, but in the Barhut Stupa they added railings. They added railings here, and then the sculptural panels. They added all this. Okay, so there were some additions, which is not too important, but just to make it interesting. And Yakshi sculptures, an important development in early Indian art. These powerful figures were symbols of prosperity, fertility, and there's this one Yakshi. Okay, Yakshi and Yaksha, these are sometimes called tree spirits, considered spirits that gave us blessing. Yakshi is female, whereas Yaksha is male, and this is how the statue looks like. If you look at the office of Reserve Bank of India, which is the central apex bank of India, right? So it is the bank that makes policies, economic and monetary policies for the entirety of India. If you look at the office of RBI, Reserve Bank of India, you will see a similar statue, Yakshi statue, a female statue, who is considered the goddess of wealth. Okay, so imanta kasi mala RBI la main office la pahar de man dangor statue ekta ase maigila na, itu maigila, the Yakshi statue. She is known as the goddess of wealth. Okay, so these were very popular during the Shunga period. And if you look at the literature and language, we have Patanjali, who existed during the time of the Shunga dynasty. He wrote Mahabhasya. Okay, I hope it's Patanjali wrote Mahabhasya. It's a great work on Sanskrit grammar and Panini's Ashtadhyayi. So Panini, we don't know when Panini existed. Okay, there is no written account of Panini's birth or when he existed. All we know is that the book Ashtadhyayi by Panini is a book on grammar, lexicon, and so forth. So this is he's considered one of the first. Even the Europeans, they credited Panini with being the first writer in the history of mankind to write about grammar and then lexicon, vocabulary, and so forth. Okay. Now, if you take a look at Patanjali, he wrote a book called Mahabhasya, which was a commentary. He commented on Panini's Ashtadhyayi, okay, about the Sanskrit grammar and how it should be, how it should not be. He praised Panini, and he also gave a statement against people who criticized Panini. He was in support of Panini. So this Mahabhasya is a very important book that you need to memorize for the Shunga period. Patanjali, he wrote Mahabhasya. And Kalitasa, he was a dramatist who wrote the play Malvik Agnimitram. Okay, it's a play about King Agnimitra, son of Pushyamitra Shunga. Okay, and in that play, Malvik Agnimitram, there's this mention of the Ashwamedha horse sacrificed by Pushyamitra Shunga, who was the king of, who was the father of King Agnimitra. At the time, he wasn't a king yet, but it talks about his early life when he was a father, and then his son Vasumitra was sent to the battle to conquer the Yavanas or the Indo-Greeks, right? So I hope this story is very clear. Kalitasa, Malvik Agnimitram. This is the book that all of you need to memorize. And when we talk about the Bhagavata or Vaishnava tradition, okay, these are all Brahmanical tradition, Hinduism, Bhagavata, Vaishnava tradition. There's this Heliodorus pillar at Besnagar, Vitisha, okay, which is in Madhya Pradesh. So Heliodorus was a Greek ambassador at the court of King Bhagabhadra, who was a Shunga ruler. The Indo-Greeks, they sent the ambassador Heliodorus to the court of King Bhagabhadra, who was a Shunga ruler. The pillar is dedicated to Vasudeva, who is also known as Krishna, God. It's a Hindu god. It refers to Heliodorus as a devotee of Vasudeva, devotee of Krishna. And this is an inscription on the Heliodorus pillar. And this pillar is an important evidence for the early Bhagavata or Vaishnava tradition. So Bhagavata, usually the god that they revere is Shiva, and Vaishnava, Vishnu. Okay, Vishnu and Shiva. So this pillar was gifted by the Indo-Greeks as a form of peace to the Shunga dynasty. And in that pillar is written, the inscription written there is in praise of Vasudeva, also known as Krishna. Hindu la isor ke praise kurigina utu pillar dishe, and this pillar is known as Heliodorus. It was sent along with Heliodorus. It was gifted by Heliodorus to King Bhagabhadra, the Shunga ruler. Okay, I hope it's clear. Now, important inscriptions, the Heliodorus, we learned about that, and Ayodhya inscription of Dana Deva. This is also very important. It mentions Dana Deva, a Shunga ruler. It provides information. All you need to know is that the Ayodhya inscription is of the Shunga dynasty belong to which king? Dana Deva. Okay. Now, it's a revision of the literary and archaeological Patanjali's Mahabhasya. We learned about that. Malvik Agnimitram. Divya Vatana, which is a Buddhist text about the Shunga dynasty. I think we were asked this question a few years back. Okay. The book Divya Vatana is related to which of the following dynasties? And the answer was Shunga. Okay. And yeah, this is not too important. Yeah, archaeological evidence. We talked about the Sanchi and the Bharut stupa being given additions as well as restorations, modifications. Okay, the stupas, the railings, sculptures, and so forth. So, to summarize it all, the last Shunga ruler, Devaputa, the decline, the end of the Shungas, the last Shunga ruler, Devaputi, was overthrown by his minister. His own minister betrayed him. He was overthrown by his minister, Vasudeva Kanva, okay, which started the Kanva dynasty. Okay, we will learn about the Kanvas, or like I said, the Kannas. Both are same. The Kanvas, they're both the same. Now, Vasudeva Kanva was the first king who established the Kanva dynasty. Okay. Now let's take a look at the Kanva dynasty. The founder of the Kanva dynasty was Vasudeva Kanva. He overthrew the last Shunga ruler Devabuddhi, who was his master of the household. Vasudeva Kanva was the master of the household, the minister of Devabuddhi, and he established the Kanva. He established the Kanva rule. Then came Bhumi Mitra, not an important king, successor of Vasudeva Kanva, son of Vasudeva Kanva. He ruled for 14 years. Very little information is known about him. And Narayana, not too important, successor of Bhumi Mitra. He ruled for around 12 years. Very little information is available about this rule. The last ruler, Susarman. Okay, the only significance of Susarman is that he was the last ruler of the Kanva dynasty, and he was defeated by the Shatavahanas, or in other words, the Andhras. The Shatavahanas are also known as the Andhras. Okay, so Kanva rule ended at around 228 BC. So we have learned about Vasudeva Kanva, which is good enough for the Kanva dynasty. Okay, nothing much to discuss here. And key features: they ruled from Patliputra. They continued many traditions of the Mauryas and the Shungas. Brahmanical traditions continued during the rule. Very important for both the Kanvas and the Shungas. The dominant religion was the Brahmanical religion or the Hindu religion. Okay, Mauryas had the Buddhist religion, whereas their successor, the Kanva and the Shungas, they followed the Brahmanical tradition. Okay, that is all you need to know about the Kanva dynasty. So NCRT highlight the Kanvas ruled for about 45 years. They succeeded the Shungas and continued many administrative traditions of the Mauryas and the Shungas. Due to lack of strong rulers, the dynasty declined. Okay, so the last dynasty was overthrown by the Andhras. Now let's take a look at the Kanva kingdom. Patliputra again was the main political center. Do not forget, Kanvas, the Shungas and the Mauryas, the main stronghold was Patliputra. Patliputra was the city situated at the confluence of at the center, meeting point, the intersection point of the the Gandak and the Son River. Okay. This was the core area of the Kanva control. It was much smaller than the Mauryan kingdom, which is very obvious. And they continued the Brahmanical Vedic tradition when it comes to religion, Ashwamedha sacrifices associated with the Kanva period. Okay. And the sources for the Kanva dynasty, primary source are the Puranas, which will contain the Kanva succession names of rulers and duration of the rule. The Puranas were written much later. Okay, so even in NCRT they take some sources from the Puranas, but not everything. The inscriptional evidence, the Ayodhya inscription of Dhanadeva, which I mentioned earlier, and the Kanva coins, rare, very scarce. Okay, the coins were very scarce during the Kanva period. And yeah, that's it. Now there was a shift of power from the Kanvas to the Shatavahanas. So if you take a look at it, Susarman, the last Kanva ruler, was overthrown at around 28 BC by Simukha, who founded the Shatavahana dynasty. Okay. So let's take a look at the Indo-Greeks before we jump to the Shatavahana dynasty. Like I said, the Mauryas were replaced by the Shungas were replaced by the Kanvas were replaced by the Shatavahanas, but the Indo-Greeks existed at the time of the Shungas and the Kanvas. So if you go to Shatavahanas, it will be too difficult for us to go back to the Indo-Greeks, because we already studied Shungas and the Kanvas. The Indo-Greeks existed at the same time as the Shungas and the Kanvas. Okay, so we will study about the Shatavahanas later on after we study the Indo-Greeks. Is that clear? I hope it's understandable. Demetrius, one of the earliest, not the first, one of the earliest and most powerful Indo-Greek rulers, extended his kingdom over Gandhara. This is Gandhara, this is Sindh, this is Punjab. Okay, now let's take a look at the first line. The Indo-Greeks were successor of the Greco-Bactrians who moved in the northwest India and established their rule in parts of Punjab. Greco-Bactrians. So the Indo-Greeks are not Indians. in the sense of our racial identity. Okay, they are Greco-Bactrians who moved into northwest India and established their rules in parts of Punjab, Gandhara, and they came from this way, okay, to India. Okay, so the first ruler was Demetrius I. He was one of the earliest and most powerful Indo-Greek ruler. He extended his kingdom over Gandhara. He extended his kingdom over Gandhara, Punjab, and parts of North India. He founded several cities. Demetrius is also not important. Of all these, the only important king is Menander. And why Menander? He's also known as Milinda. Okay, period of rule is from 165 to 130 BCE. He was the most famous Indo-Greek king. He extended his rule up to the Ganges Valley, Patliputra region. Now imagine, up to Patliputra region. He extended his rule up to Patliputra region, the east side of India. And he is known for his just administration and so forth. He was famous for the dialogue Milinda Banha with the monk Nagasena. Okay, Milinda Banha or Milinda Banho was a book written by Nagasena that talks about the conversation between Nagasena and Menander. Okay, this is a very important book, Milinda Banha or Milinda Banho. It's a book written by Nagasena and talks about the conversation between Menander and Nagasena. Okay, the rest of the kings, not important. Strato was one of the last important Indo-Greek rulers. His realm gradually declined due to the rise of local powers. Okay, the Indo-Greek power in India ended by the mid-1st century BCE. There's not much account about the decline of the Indo-Greeks. Eventually, they continued to be conquered by other regional kingdoms, such as the Sungas, the Kanvas, and later on the Shatavahanas, and then the Kushanas. Okay. Now, these are the important features. The Indo-Greeks issued bilingual coins, Greek and Kharosthi script. Okay, the coins were issued in Greek and Kharosthi script, and they promoted Indo-Greek art, a blend of Indian and Indian styles. Now, due to Hellenistic, they did not create the Gandhara art. Very important point. The Gandhara art is an art form in ancient India that developed as a result of the influence of the Hellenistic culture, which means the Greek culture. Okay, I talked about Hellenistic, right? The term Hellenism in my previous class. So, Gandhara art was influenced by the Hellenistic culture, and the Gandhara art later on developed as an art form, but it was influenced by the Hellenistic culture. Okay, the Greek culture. And we will learn about Gandhara art later on, and you will know why it has this Hellenistic influence. Now, these are the important points. Menander and Buddhism, we talked about that. The territory and important cities. The most important territory within the Indo-Greek is Sakala. Okay, that was a place where Menander resided. So it is closely associated with Menander or Milinda. Sakala. The rest of the places you do not need to memorize, but Sakala in particular you need to memorize. Okay. So Milinda Bana, we talked about Menander and Buddhism. We talked about Milinda Bana, the dialogue between King Milinda and Nagasena. Okay. And these are the features of the Indo-Greeks. Excellent portrait of coins of rulers. Okay. The image of the ruler is imprinted on the coin, and Greek and Kharosthi script were used, and that's an example of the Greek as well as Indian influence. Kharosthi, Indian, Greek, right? And Greek and Indian religious symbols again continue to appear. Greek legends on coins, Greek script plus Kharosthi script are frequently seen. Coins reflect Greek plus Indian culture and economic integration. So if you look at the Greek coin, it's a combination of both the Greek as well as the Indian influence, the Greek script and the Kharosthi script of the Indian subcontinent. Heliodoros, we talked about Heliodoros, right? Heliodoros, it was sent by King Andelkitas of the Indo-Greek kingdom to the court of Bhagabhadra, the Shunga ruler, and Heliodorus gifted this pillar which praised Vasudeva, also known as Krishna. Okay. Now, if you look at the Indo-Greeks and Indian art, see the Greek or Hellenistic element and Indian elements. When we talk about these two, when we talk about art, okay, we see the difference in the Indian elements and the Greek elements. The Greeks are more natural. The Indians, they are mostly symbolic. They don't try to create a perfect picture of whatever they're trying to create, whatever they're trying to imitate. They mostly deal with themes and symbolism, but the Greeks were far advanced in terms of creating real art, okay? Natural modeling, realistic human figures. I'm sure you guys have seen the sculptures of the Greeks of the ancient times, the statue of Zeus, Apollo, right? They even have the shape of the cloth. Like they were very advanced, okay? Realistic human figures, drapery with folds. And these Corinthian columns, capital, vine motifs are all features of the Greek elements. Their love for realism and proportion, okay? Realism instead of supernaturalism. Now, supernaturalism would be Indian elements. They have so much belief in the supernatural, whereas for the Greeks, their love for realism and proportion was very, very important. Proportion means the proportion of the hand. The size of the hand needs to be in stark proportion to the size of the body, and so forth, okay? They created realistic art, whereas Indian elements, indigenous themes and symbolism, they mostly dealt with symbols and themes, religious ideas, Buddhist, Indian deities, the Yaksha Yakshi tradition, which I mentioned about earlier, and narrative relief techniques, okay? It was more narrative. It will contain the stories. Now, Indo-Greeks and the Shungas, the Pushamitra Shunga and the Ashwamedha sacrifice, which I mentioned earlier, is the most important contact between the Indo-Greeks and the Shungas, okay, the prince. And then we have the literary sources, Milinda Bana, which I mentioned about earlier, Malvik Agnimitram, okay. We have the epigraphic sources of Heliodorus. The Heliodorus pillar inscription is important. And that's it, okay, that's it about the Indo-Greeks. Now, here are some questions that all of you should be able to answer after this lecture. Who were the Indo-Greeks? The Indo-Greeks were the Greek rulers who established their kingdoms in northwest India, right? Mentioned about that. Their predecessor state, Greco-Bactrian kingdom, okay? Mentioned about that earlier as well. Now, main region, Gandhara and Punjab, northwest, Gandhara and Punjab. The most famous Indo-Greek ruler, Menander. Menander's Indian name, Milinda. Okay, Menander's Buddhist text, Milinda Banha. Okay, Milinda Banha is a book that talks about the conversation between Milinda or Menander and Nakasena. Okay, the Buddhist monk Nakasena. The famous Indo-Greek evidence, coins. Why? The figure of the kings were, the heads of the kings were inscribed in the coins. Okay, imprinted in the coins. The script on coins, Greek and Kharosthi, bilingual script. I talked about that, right? If we talk about Indo-Greek, the Indo-Greeks, and if they ask you a question about the script that they use, some of you might answer Greek, but the answer is Greek and Kharosthi. Okay, who was the Greek ambassador that was sent to the court of Bhagabhadra, the Shunga ruler? Heliodorus, right? And Heliodorus was sent by Andelkitas. And the location of the pillar was Besnagar of Vidisha, Madhya Pradesh, right? And the pillar was dedicated to Vasudeva, who's also known as Krishna, okay? And the major artistic influence, Hellenistic or Greek influence, right? And major Indian region of the Indo-Greek rule, northwest India. So these are some of the important questions that they might possibly ask in relation to the Indo-Greeks. Is that clear? Now we will come back to Shatavahanas. The Shatavahanas replaced the Ganvas, right? I talked about that. After the Maurya came the Shungas and the Kanvas. And during the same time as the Shungas and the Kanvas existed the Indo-Greeks, which we studied about. All these three overlap, ekta category as it. Then comes the Shatavahanas. Okay, so we will link Shatavahanas with the Kanva, the last king Kanva and the first king of the Shatavahanas. Okay, so the founder of the Shatavahana dynasty was Simukha. He was a founder of the Shatavahana dynasty. He established their rule in the Deccan after the decline of the Mauryas. Simukha established his rule in the Deccan after the decline of the Mauryas. It was a small kingdom, but it became much larger after they defeated the Kanvas. Okay. Now, after Simukha came Ganha, not important. Yashna Shatakarni, important. Okay, Yashna Shatakarni, second most important. Okay, he performed 2 Ashwamedha sacrifices. And he was a powerful ruler who consolidated the Shatavahana power, and he promoted Brahmanical traditions very rigorously. And Siri Shatakarni, not important. Kodamai Putra Shatakarni is the most important of the Shatavahana dynasty. All you need to know about the Shatavahana dynasty is that Simukha was a ruler, right? He defeated the Kanvas and he founded the Shatavahana dynasty. Kodamai Putra was the greatest ruler of the Shatavahanas. He defeated the Shakas, Western Kshatrapas, which we will learn about later, about the Shakas. Okay? And he also restored the Shatavahana power by defeating the Shakas. His mother, Gautami Balashri, is known from her Nasik inscription. The Nasik inscription was written by Gautami Putra Shatakarni's mother, Gautami Balashri, which we will learn about that later. Don't be confused. And one of the last kings, Vishishta Putra Pulamavi, he continued the dynasty's powers, issued coins and grants. And later on, the Shatavahana dynasty declined. Okay? These are some of the points that you can go back home and read. But very important point, they patronized Buddhism. The Mauryas patronized Buddhism. The Shungas and the Kanvas, Brahmanical tradition. The Shatavahanas, back to Buddhism. Okay? So there was this exchange, right? Of the Buddhists, the Brahmanical tradition, and sometimes the Jains. The Kalinga empire that you will learn about later, they patronized Jainism. Okay? So different kingdoms, different religion. Okay? Now, this particular Shatavahana dynasty, they patronized Buddhism. They excavated many caves such as the Nasik, Karle, and Ganhere. Very important, okay? The Shatavahana empire, you have to learn very sincerely. The inscriptions on the coins are, the language used is the Prakrit and the script used is the Brahmi. Okay? Now we will learn about Gautami Putra Shatakarni. I've given you guys a very clear, we've already learned about that in the earlier slide. He's considered the greatest Shatavahana ruler. He defeated the Shakas or the Western Kshatrapas. He also defeated the Yavanas and the Pallavas. The Pallavas are the Shakas that are in northwest part of India, the Pallavas, and then the Yavanas are Indo-Greeks. Okay, according to the Nasik inscription. Nasik inscription was written by Palashri, the mother of Gautami Putra Shatakarni. He is claimed to have destroyed the pride of the Kshatriyas. Who are the Kshatriyas? The soldiers, right? Or even the king is considered a Kshatriya. He was a destroyer. Okay, he was a destroyer of Kshatriyas. Why? Because he defeated the Yamanas, the Pallavas, the Shakas, or the Western Kshatrapas, right? So he was popularly known as the destroyer of the Kshatriyas. Okay, now skip that. He is known primarily through the Nasik inscription of his mother, Gautami Palashri. The Nasik inscription was written by his mother, Gautami Palashri, and it is through the Nasik inscription that a lot of details about Gautami Putra Shatakarni is known. Okay, now a very interesting fact. Gautami Putra Shatakarni. Gautami Putra means son of Gautami. Putra means son of Gautami. Gautami is the name of Gautami Putra Shatakarni's mother. So, if you look at the naming system, they followed the practice of metronymics, okay, which means names referring to mother. Amala nam chulai. Okay, amala nam do tala amala nam do Kotami Balashri takise. The tala nam do son of Kotami Putra. Na inigala. But that doesn't mean that the society was matriarchal. No. Okay, just a naming system. Just a naming system. Amala nam etop kore. Kotami Putra, Shatakarni. Even the later kings, okay, the names that they adopted had references of their mothers. So very similar to the Mauryan Empire, the Ahmadiyas. If you take a look at the administration of the Shatavahana dynasty, we had the king, the officials, and then the local administration. High officials were known as Ahmadiyas, and important feudatory chiefs and local magnates were Maharatis and Mahabochas. Okay, the Shatavahana dynasties were important for the feudal system. Okay, they had lords, and then these lords were mustered up at times of war, and these lords were feudatory chiefs, and they controlled certain territories. They controlled not only the territories but certain soldiers, and they were given land to collect revenue. These were feudal chiefs, okay? So they had the feudatory system, and the important feudatory chiefs were known as Maharatis or Mahabochas. And the administrative division of the kingdom, Ahara, it was divided. The kingdom was entire kingdom was divided into Aharas, and these were administrative divisions, okay? The kings relied considerably on local chiefs and feudatories for administration, okay? The Shatavahana rule was not as centrally controlled as the Mauryan Empire. Why? It was a collection of feudatories, like I said, feudatories, okay, feudal lords. Now, Shatavahana rulers frequently used names derived from their mothers, which I've explained that earlier. Examples: Kotami Putra Shatakarni, Vishista Putra Bulamavi, and so forth. But be very careful. Metronymic name is not equal to matriarchal society. Okay, it indicates the importance of the mother's lineage or name, not that women ruled the society. Men continued to rule the society. It was a patriarchal society, but the naming system was metronymical. Now, let's look at the Kotami Putra Palashri, a woman's voice in Shatavahana history. Okay, it was through the Nasik inscription of Kotami Palashri, the mother of Kotami Putra Shatakarni, that the history of Shatavahana dynasty could be reconstructed, especially the history of Kotami Putra Shatakarni. Okay, the entire journey of Kotami Putra Shatakarni is done. Now, what did we talk about earlier about the inscriptions being deciphered or deciphered? The earliest inscription that we were able to decipher was the Ashokan inscription, okay, the Mauryan inscription. Now, we have also seen the scripts and the seals and the inscriptions of the Indus Valley civilization, early Vedic age, later Vedic age, but none of these inscriptions have been deciphered till date. Okay, itadak to mon pujo paranai, but from Mauryan period onwards, pujo parishe mo. So just know that the Nasik inscription be mon pujo parishe. Okay, the earliest inscription mon pujo parado Ashokan inscription ase. Beyond that, eko no pujo mon meaning ki ase. Okay, so Kotami Balashri was the mother of Kotami Putra Shatakarni, one of the greatest rulers of the Shatavahana dynasty. Okay, so the Nasik inscription, all you need to know is that Kotami Putra Shatakarni wrote the Nasik inscription. That's it. But just for your information, it talks about the Shatavahana dynasty, the ideals of rules and duty, the royal genealogy, which means the first king, second king, third king, and so forth, and military claims, victories, and social identities, role of royal women, political geography. Okay, all these are mentioned in the Nasik cave inscription of Kotami Balashri. Now, if you take a look at the Shatavahana, the economy, trade, coins, and religion, you can take a look at it once you go back home. agriculture, crafts, inland trade, long distance trade, maritime trade, everything happened at one. Uh, yeah, we will take a look at it later on, okay? And coins, Shatavana. One very important point is that the chief building material of the Shatavana coins is lead. Lead is very um, widely used, okay, for the making of coins. These are very important points. These are very important points for your examination, okay? They are going to ask you such trivial facts. They're not going to ask you who was the ruler of the Shatavana dynasty. That's long gone. That's long gone. Back in 2008, okay, there was this question in preliminary. Naro, who recently won the Naga Idol, belongs to which tribe? And they rephrased that same question next year. Naro won which of the following competitions? Everyone could have answered that, right? But now you will not get such. And even there was even this one question: which of the following is not a major tribe of? Which of the following is a major tribe of Nagaland? They added the Konyaks, and then they added the rest of the tribes that are outside of Nagaland. To kun najine Konyak ando major tribe of Nagaland asibuna. So all these were easy questions that were asked back then, okay? But now no one's gonna ask you which tribe Nara belong to. No one's gonna ask you that. Okay, they're gonna ask you some very difficult ones, so you have to be ready for that. So the chief building material for the Shatavana coins is lead. Okay, these are very trivial facts, and these are very important ones. Now, Shatavahana coins, the feature, it'll contain animals, ships, symbols, and Prakrit language written in Brahmi script. Okay. Now, important Buddhist sites. The Nasik caves is very important. Ganheri caves is very important. Amaravati cave is very important. Karli caves is very important. Now, Nagarjuna Konta, it is more strongly associated with the Ishwagas, which replaced the Shatavahana dynasty. We will learn about that later. Okay. Now, Amaravati, the great Buddhist center. This is stupa, a dome-shaped building. This is known as stupa. Okay. It was a major Buddhist monument located in Andhra Pradesh, present-day Andhra Pradesh, and associated with the Amaravati School of Art. It was built during the time of the Shatavahanas. Okay, the Shatavahanas built that. Remember that. They also built the Nasik caves, the Karli caves, and the Ganheri caves. Okay. Now, art and architecture. Yeah, we learned about that just now. Prakrit language and Brahmi script. Again, I kept on repeating Prakrit language. The language that they used was Prakrit. The script that they used for writing the language was Brahmi script. Okay. And King Hala, one of the kings of the Shatavahana dynasty, he wrote a book called Katha Saptasati. I've edited because back then I would have thought it's not too important, because the book is a very minor book and something that literally no one knows. But we were asked this question, okay? We were asked this question, and I was lucky enough to have studied it, so I've included that in your presentation as well. King Hala wrote Katha Saptasati. That's a book written by one of the kings of the Shatavahana dynasty, Katha Saptasati. King Hala wrote Katha Saptasati. King Hala wrote Katha Saptasati. Memorize that, okay? And women and donation. Women played an important role in society and were donors of caves, pillars, railings, etc. The Nasik inscription of Kotami Palashri is one very good example. And the decline of Shatavahana dynasty. Now, if you look at the decline of Shatavahana dynasty, it wasn't directly overthrown by one kingdom, okay? Since they had a lot of feudal lords, okay, all these feudal lords declared independence, and there were many divisions during the period of the decline of the Shatavahana dynasty. If you look at the Mauryas, the last Mauryan king was directly defeated. The last Mauryan king, Brihadrata, was directly defeated by Pushyamitra Shunga. And then Pushyamitra Shunga, the last ruler of the Shunga dynasty, was directly defeated by the Kanva dynasty, the Kanva ruler, and so forth. Okay, but here the Shatavahana dynasty, they followed the feudal system. It wasn't the administration wasn't too central. It wasn't too strongly controlled by the head, the central figure, but it was more of a federal structure. okay, ruled by feudatories in their own respective areas. So during the decline of the Shatavahana dynasty, these feudal lords, they declared the independence, and some of the feudal lords, they went on to create large kingdoms, which we will learn about that in the later lectures. Okay, so all you need to know is that the Shatavahana dynasty power gradually declined from the 2nd century AD, CE or AD onwards. Okay, now the increasing independence of feudatories and pressure from rival dynasties like the Western Kshatrabas, Abhiras, we will learn about that in the later slides as well. The successor power in Andhra region, I mentioned that earlier, the Ishwakus, okay? The Ishwakus became an important power in the Andhra region after the decline of the Shatavahanas, okay? Now lead coins, quick recall, okay? NPSC quick recall, Pragrate and Brahmi script, Amaravati Stupa, Gautamiputra Balashri, and the Nasik inscription, right? And decline after the 2nd century Common Era, Ishwakus important in Andhra region. The Ishwakus replaced the main stronghold of the Shatavahanas. Okay, so lastly we will take a look at the trade and commerce. If you take a look at the trade and commerce, so this yellow region, okay, this yellow region was controlled by the Shatavahana Empire, and they also had trade with the Roman. Rome is like way towards the west, okay, but why to Rome, Egypt? This was Egypt. This is Egypt, and so Egypt was controlled by Rome, by the Romans, and whatever the Shatavahana Empire wishes to export would be sent from Sobara, okay, the dockyard in Sobara, all the way to Egypt, which would again be taken to Rome. So they had trade with Rome because Roman coins were found in plenty in Shatavahana regions. Okay, see, take a look at Roman coin found at Python, the Roman amphora. Okay, a very impressive vessel. Now Shatavahana ports had sea trade with the Roman Empire, West Asia, okay, and which would be Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and so forth, and Southeast Asia, Indonesia, with one countries cannot be connected like this. So this is all. This entire picture shows the trade relations of the Shatavahana dynasty with the West Asia, Egypt, and Southeast Asia. Okay, via ship. Nah, interesting, right? If you take a look at the map, you understand better about the entire territory. You understand better about how the different trade relations happen. Do don't so seriously blue color. I mean, why am I even mentioning that? So this is how Shatavahana dynasty conducted trade with the rest of the world, and the rest, I think all of you will understand the maps. I talked about Paliputra, Ujjain, Taxila, and so forth, and also to China. Okay, to China via Patliputra. Take a look at how important Patliputra is. Just take a look at how important Patliputra is. Again, it even connects to China. It also connects to southeast. It connects to Taxila, which was the gateway to the west. Right, Patliputra was very important. But Shatavahana Empire did not control Patliputra. Okay. Now this is the NPSC checklist. After every topic, I prepare the checklist. I will first learn about the period. They did not provide the exact date in the NCRT, which is why I haven't provided it as well. In some other books, they provide the dates, but we follow NCRT. Okay. Founder Simuka, greatest ruler Gautamiputra Shatakarni, who defeated the Shakas, the Yavanas, Balavas, and restored the Shatavahana power. Okay, important early ruler, not important. Important later ruler. These are the kings that they might ask, so I've mentioned it as well. Important successor, Vishista Putra Pulamavi, mother of Gautami Putra, Gautami Palashri. Metronymics, Gautami Putra Vishista Pura, right? Son of Gautami. Okay, our son of Vasisti. Na Amala Nam Julai Nam Dido, and then famous inscription is a Nasik inscription written by Gautami Balashri. Language Prakrit, script Brahmi. Okay, Brahmi, Prakrit, and Brahmi. Language used was Prakri, and the script used to write that language was Brahmi. Now, the most famous literature, King Hala wrote Katha Sapte Sati. I mentioned about that earlier, King Hala. And then most famous Buddhist monument, Amaravati Stupa. Mentioned about that earlier. Art, Amaravati School of Art is related to Shatavahana dynasty. Okay, Amaravati School of Art is related to Shatavahana dynasty. The famous cave, Nasik Karle Kanhere, which I mentioned about earlier. So as long as you know about all that, you're good to go. Okay, you're good to go. I've mentioned everything: coins, lead coins, trade and economy. Important trade center, Pradisthana. I forgot to mention that. Pradisthana is also mentioned in the map. Okay, Baitan, Pradisthana is a very important trade center. If they ask you, this is the number one trade center that they might ask you. Okay. The Roman coins were found in South India or Deccan. I've mentioned about that as well. And it is through these coins that we knew that the Shatavahanas conducted trade with the Roman Empire. Okay. Now let's switch to the Shakas, the Indo-Scythians. The Shakas, it's very confusing to know or to learn the Shakas or even to research for me as well, but I've tried my best to create a map to show you exactly what the Shakas were. Okay. Now, if you guys want to go back, we can go back once. Yeah. Shakas. The Shakas, these are the Shakas. They existed at the same time as the Shatavahanas. Okay. These are the Shakas, and the Kushanas will come, they will control the Shakas, and then the Shakas will continue to be to serve as feudatory of the Kushanas. Okay, especially during the rule of Kanishka, the Shakas will be under the control of the Kushanas eventually. But we are going to learn about Shakas. We have learned about the Shungas, we have learned about the Kanvas, we have learned about the Indo-Greeks, we have learned about the Shatavahanas just now, and we will move on to the Shakas. Okay. Yeah, this is the Shakas. Now, there were two types of Shakas. First of all, Northwest India, they were known as Indo-Scythians or Parthians, and Western India, they were known as Western Kshatrapas. But these are both Shakas. They both came from the same place, except they established their rule in different part of India. Okay, Northwestern India, Indo-Scythians and Indo-Parthians, not too important, but Western India, the Western Kshatrap, very important. Now, if you look at the Northwest, these are the kings, and if you look at the Western India, these are the kings. Okay, if you look at the Northwest, Mawis or Moka is the earliest known Indo-Scythian ruler in India. His coins are found in very large number, and through which we learned that Moka was one of the earliest kings of or ruler of the Northwest India, this Indo-Scythians or Indo-Parthians. So they might ask you in the examination, the Indo-Scythians or Indo-Parthians belong to which region of India? Northwest. Okay, Azes, not important. Azelis, not important. Condophernes, important. Okay, Condophernes or Condophernes. The term that you can use is Condophernes. This is much more popularly used in NCERT books. The most famous Indo-Parthian king was Condophernes. Nothing much to study about the with Northwest Indo-Scythians or Indo-Parthians, except Condophernes. He is known from the coins and the Periples of the Erythraean Sea. We do not know who the author of the Periples of the Erythraean Sea is, but judging by the stories mentioned in that book, it shows that the society that he explained was during the rule of Condophernes. Okay, so the Periples of the Erythraean Sea is a book that contains information about the Indo-Scythians or Indo-Parthians. Okay, a very important book. Now, Condophernes, he issued bilingual coins, Greek and Kharosthi script. Okay. The Shakas were Central Asian nomadic tribes. Now, if you take a look at the present map, Central Asian nomadic tribes, we are taking a look at Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. Okay, do you guys know the UFC fighter Shavkat Rakhmonov? There's this fighter. If you take a look at him, you will understand how the Kushans look like. They look like us, but a little bit more, I think, fair, I would say, and more hair. Okay, so the Shakas, they came from the Central Asia. Okay, nomadic tribes called Scythians, and they entered in waves. Okay, they entered India in waves from Central Asian nomadic tribe, from Central Asia, and established kingdoms in two different regions, Northwest and then Western India. I hope that is clear. They came from Central Asia, and they entered India, and they formed two different kingdoms, one in Northwest and one in Western India. Okay, these are the Shakas. And the ruler of the Western India, Western Kshatrapas, the first ruler was Nahabana. Okay, and the second was Jashtana, Rudradaman I. Okay, and now it was a very small kingdom, but it was Jashtana who founded the Western Kshatrapas. Okay, but this is not much important, because in the examination, the first king of the Western Kshatrapas was Nahabana. Okay, even though it was Jashtana who made the kingdom powerful, the first ruler was Nahabana, and the most important ruler was Rudradaman. Okay, now who is Gautamiputra Shatakarni? Gautamiputra Shatakarni was one of the rulers of the Shatavahana. Okay, and he defeated Nahabana. So don't forget that. Nahabana was defeated by Gautamiputra Shatakarni, and later on, the Western Kshatrapas will also take revenge against the Shatavahanas. So there was this war between different kingdoms. We saw the war between the Shakas and the Kanvas. Okay, the Indo-Greeks and the Shakas. Right? Earlier we talked about that. So there was this interchange of war or battle among different kingdoms. Now, if you take it, the Northwest India, the inscription that they wrote was in Kharosthi script. The coins are bilingual, Greek and Kharosthi. Major centers, Texila is here. Okay, so nothing much to explain here. The Junagar inscription of Rudradaman is very important, and Sudarshana lake was repaired during the rule of Rudradaman. What is Sudarshana lake? It was a lake. Okay, that was very important. You will learn about that in the later slides. The Sudarshana lake, which continued to be repaired. It was created during the time of the Mauryas, and it was repaired by the Shakas. It was repaired by the Kushanas, but more importantly, it was repaired. It was repaired really well by Rudradaman, which is why the repair of Sudarshan lake is usually attributed to Rudradaman I. Okay, you will learn about the importance of the Sudarshana lake later on in the slides. Now, the Shakas, key takeaway from this slide is that the Shakas established kingdoms in two different regions of India, the Northwest and the West, and they played an important role in Indian history by strengthening trade, using coins, and promoting cultural synthesis. Okay, this is the map, and important facts about the Shakas. The Junagar inscription of Rudradaman I. This is another fact that you need to know, and it is a long Sanskrit prashasti, one of the earliest and finest examples of Sanskrit inscriptions. Eulogy, okay, eulogy, which means in praise of someone. Okay, it was in praise of Rudradaman I, and the inscription tells us about Rudradaman's achievements and glorious genealogy. Like, eulogies are created by various kings to describe their achievements and their goodness and their love for the people. So Rudradaman's inscription was the Junagar inscription. Okay, it's eulogy. Now, it also talks about the repair of the Sudarshana lake. The reason why I keep on repeating about Sudarshana lake is that we were asked this question once again last year. Right, the repairing of Sudarshana lake is related to which of the following kings? And the answer is always, even though a lot of kings replace it, the major repairing was done by Rudradaman I. So if they ask you this question, the answer is Rudradaman I. Okay, not any other king. The Sudarshana Lake. It was originally constructed during the Mauryan period by Bhushagupta, the governor of Saurashtra under Chandragupta Maurya. Again, who originally constructed the Sudarshana Lake? Bhushagupta. Okay, who was the governor? You don't need to know of Saurashtra. You don't need to know who was the governor under Chandragupta Maurya. Okay, it was later repaired by Tusaspa during the Yamana ruler Bhadra after a flood. Rudradaman I again repaired and restored the lake and strengthened its embankment. So the only fact you need to know is that it was originally constructed by Bhushagupta under Chandragupta Maurya, and later on the repair was done by Rudradaman I. Okay. Now Kshatrapa was known as the provincial governor, or these are the two terms used by the Kushanas. Okay, one is Kshatrapa and second is Mahakshatrapa. Now usually over time, when we take a look at the Shakas, the western Kshatrapas as well as the northern Shakas, these two terms, Kshatrapa and Mahakshatrapa, these two terms, Kshatrapa and Mahakshatrapa, are used interchangeably. Sometimes the king would directly be known as a Kshatrapa, sometimes he would be known as a Mahakshatrapa, and every time he is known as Mahakshatrapa, various other princes or his subordinates would be called a Kshatrapa. All you need to know is that Kshatrapa is generally considered a provincial governor or a regional ruler, and Mahakshatrapa is the overall king. Okay, regional ruler is Kshatrapa and Mahakshatrapa is the overall king. And these are the coins of the Shatavahana period, of the Shaka period. The names of the rulers are clearly mentioned in the coins, and the titles, either Kshatrapa or Mahakshatrapa, is mentioned. Father's name is mentioned. The symbols are mentioned. Dates, script, very detailed. Okay, the Shaka coins were very detailed, and the Shaka era begins from 78 CE. It is traditionally associated with the Shakas or Western Kshatrapas. It was widely used in inscriptions of documents and historical records in India. The Shaka era, you will learn about how the Indian calendar system, we follow the Gregorian calendar system, but the Indian government, they follow the Shaka era. Okay, Shaka calendar. You will learn about it in your geography class. The Shaka calendar. Now, yeah, you will learn about that in the later classes. I will skip that since we do not have much time. Yeah, this is Sudarshana Lake. Okay, it was an artificial lake or reservoir in western India. The water supplied the fields through canals. That's the importance of the Sudarshana Lake. Without Sudarshana Lake, there's no proper irrigation. Without proper irrigation, there's no proper food surplus, proper food production. Without proper food production, there's no growth in economy. Without the growth in economy, the king collapses. Okay, so Sudarshana Lake was very important to maintain maximum agricultural producers. Okay, it was the medium through which water was supplied to the entirety of the region, producing various crops. Okay, it increased agricultural production, and which generated higher revenue for the state and for the growth of settlement. That's the important thing about the Sudarshana Lake. Now we talk about the Western Kshatrapas. Okay, Western Kshatrapas, the Shakas and the Shatavahanas mature political rivalry. I mentioned earlier that the Shatavahana king Gautamiputra Shatakarni defeated Nahabana, the first ruler of the Western Kshatrapas. Okay, this established Shatavahana influence in Western India. Okay, the Western Kshatrapas and Shatavahanas competed for control of the Western area. Their main areas of the conflict were Gujarat, Malwa, and Western Deccan. Gujarat, Malwa, and Western Deccan. These were the three main areas of conflict. Okay, the Nahabana versus Gautamiputra Shatakarni. Nahabana was defeated. Okay, and Western Kshatrapa coins, I mentioned about that. Religion, they followed the Brahmanical traditions, the Shakas, patronized Vedic rituals, Brahmins in Sanskrit culture, but they also supported Buddhist monasteries and contributed to Buddhist art in some regions. Jainism, they patronized Jain acharyas and institutions in Western India. So it was a combination of both these three religions. When we talk about the Shungas and the Kanvas, they followed the Brahmanical religion. The Mauryas before them followed the Buddhist religion, and the Shatavahanas followed Buddhism. And here they followed all three religions. Okay. We talked about the Kshatrapa and the Mahakshatrapa, the two titles used by the Shakas, and the trade in Western India. Western Kshatrapa territories were strategically located in important trade routes. Gujarat, if you're in Gujarat, you know that you're in a coastal area, right? It opens up possibilities for trades, and connected North India, Deccan, Arabian Sea. This is the Arabian Sea, okay? North India and then the Deccan and then the Arabian Sea were all connected by the Western Kshatrapa territory, okay? Now, these are the checklists, Shaka checklists. Shakas were originally from Central Asia. Another name for the Shakas, they were also called Indo-Scythians. Two broad Shaka areas, northwest India and then the western India. Western branch was known as Western Kshatrapas. The most important Western Kshatrapa ruler was Rudradaman. I talked about him repairing the Sudarshan lake, right? And Rudradaman's famous inscription, the Junagadh inscription, which is the eulogy of Rudradaman, okay? It was in praise of Rudradaman, which talks about even him repairing the Sudarshan lake. And the inscription language, Sanskrit, type of inscription, Prashasti or eulogy. An example would be the Junagadh inscription, which is in praise of, or eulogy. Eulogy meaning in praise of Rudradaman. The famous public work was the repair of Sudarshana lake, right? The Shaka administrative title, Kshatrapa or Mahakshatrapa, higher title Mahakshatrapa and Kshatrapa. If they ask you in examination, Mahakshatrapa or Kshatrapa is related to which of the following dynasties? Shaka. Okay, Shaka era begins in 78 CE. The important Shatavahana opponent, Nahabana. Nahabana was defeated by Kodamiputra Shatakarni. I mentioned it earlier, Kodamiputra Shatakarni. Major evidence for Western Kshatrapas, coins plus inscriptions, okay? Major region, Gujarat, Kathiawar, Malwa. Major cultural feature, gradual Indianization or assimilation. Gradual Indianization, major cultural feature. It became more Indian, the Shakas, with the rule of the Shakas. The Shakas adopted Indian practices and integrated into Indian society over time. Since they came from Central Asia, right, they would have their Central Asian culture. They came in, and the major cultural feature we see is the gradual Indianization of these Shakas. Okay, when it comes to food, when it comes to dressing, everything, they slowly and by slowly assimilated into the Indian culture. So the focus on exam tip would be the focus on Rudradaman, Nahabana, the first ruler, the Shaka era, the titles, Kshatrapa or Mahakshatrapa, and then the coins. Okay. Now, if you take a look at the competition between the Shakas and the Shatavahanas, okay, wanted to mention that. Now, if you take a look at Gautamiputra Shatakarni, the Shatavahana ruler, he defeated Rudradaman, he defeated Nahabana, the first ruler of the Western Kshatrapas. But Rudradaman, okay, one of the rulers, also defeated the Shatavahanas later on. So there was this exchange of war in which one defeated the other and the other defeated the first. So there was this win and lose interchange in terms of war between the Shakas and the Shatavahanas. Okay, this is it, and usually it's for the control over Nasik, Pradhisthana, and mainly Ujjain. Okay, these were the areas of conflict where the Shakas and then the Shatavahanas battled against. So we will learn about, we have just 2 slides left. We will learn about Kalinga very briefly, okay? It's not too important. There are some 2 to 3 facts that you will need to learn about the Kalinga. It's in the present day Odisha. I've shown you guys the map. I've shown you guys the map earlier. Mola side Fanias Day. East Fane, east part of India. After the Mauryas, Kalinga emerged as a strong regional power in Eastern India. While all of this were happening, even Kalinga continued to emerge as a powerful kingdom. Okay, its heartland is the present-day Odisha. The most important king, the dynasty that ruled was Mahamega Vahana dynasty of Kalinga. Okay, the dynasty that ruled Kalinga was Mahamega Vahana, and the king that was very popular during the time was Kharavela. Okay, King Kharavela was a prominent ruler of the Mahamega Vahana dynasty of Kalinga, and chronology 1st century BC to approximation we have no idea. Now Kharavela is associated with Jainism. Very interesting, right? We learned about the Buddhists and the Shatavahanas and the Mauryas, they patronized Buddhism. The Sungas and the Kanvas, they patronized Brahmanical tradition. Here, Kalinga region, they patronize Jainism. Okay, that's a very important fact that you guys need to memorize for your examination. So now inscription. When we talk about inscription, the first is when we talk about inscription, the most important is the Udaigiri or Hadikumba inscription. I think you will find it in the next slide. Hadikumba inscription. I will explain that in the next slide. Which talks about literally everything. Okay, so about the Kalinga region, it is their main stronghold. Their main area of stronghold was in the modern-day Odisha. Mahamega Vahana dynasty was a dynasty that ruled Kalinga. The important ruler that you need to know was King Kharavela. The religion that they patronized was Jainism, and the inscription was Hadikumba inscription. These are the 5 facts that you need to know about Kalinga dynasty. If you know these 5 facts, you are good to go. Okay, you do not need to know anything beyond these 5 facts. Now let's talk about Hadikumba inscription. Okay, the Hadikumba inscription is in present-day Odisha and is the former source of information about King Kharavela or Mahamega Vahana dynasty. Okay, it provides very valuable details on King Kharavela's activities and so forth. Okay, it also mentions his achievements, and it also mentions that Kharavela is associated with Jainism. And in Hadikumba inscription, it talks about Jainism, and the 2 caves that's important that was created by King Kharavela was the Udaigiri Khandagiri caves, the twin caves, okay, situated very nearby each other, to Udayagiri Khandagiri cave of Odisha. Okay, these are the 6 facts that you need to know about Kalinga dynasty, and if you know these 6 facts, you are good to go. Alag iku napurili hujaw. Now these are the 6 facts that you need to know. The Hadikumba inscription in Udayagiri, Odisha, the Udayagiri and Khandagiri caves, Jainism, and King Kharavela was a king, and Mahamega Vahana dynasty was a dynasty that ruled Kalinga. Okay, these are the facts. As long as you know these facts, you are good to go about the Kalinga dynasty.